kids in my school, they called me Power Ranger Naps. They bullied me. They bullied me. They bullied me. They bullied me. And because I was so bullied, you know, like that person who's bullied, you have to make up for it. I developed a very sharp tongue. Sharp tongue. You'll say something to me, before you even finish sentence, I'll say something back to you. Everyone will go, oh! I'll walk away. Sharp tongue. So now, people who were also being bullied would ally themselves with me because they had faith that if anyone were to say something to them, I would just spit something right back, and then we'd walk away. Watch this. Now, if I was unable to do what they expected me to do,
come on.
If I was inadequate in the area that they expected me to be adequate, then they wouldn't stand behind me when we were being bullied. So the fact that they stood with me meant that they believed that I was able to defend them. So now implicitly, on the inverse, we can understand this. Even if you don't mean it, you don't think it, the fact that sometimes when we're faced with situations where it's like stand for Christ or stand against him, and we don't choose to stand for him, is because for some reason, somehow, in some place, even if it's subconsciously, we don't believe that he's more powerful than the stuff that we're seeing. That's problematic. When you don't believe that God is bigger and shinier than all the stuff that's happening outside. When you see things that would require a child of God to speak up, because you don't believe that God is bigger than the big stuff outside. Can I make this plain? If you don't have faith that God is your all in all, you'll start looking for all in all other things. That's why, listen. It's not that the world is so glamorous that it's like, oh man, I gotta have it. Man, I love weed, I gotta smoke it. No. It's not that it's better. No. It's just that, they're gonna get mad at me. So I need you guys to defend me. They're gonna get mad at me. It's just that, for some reason, we have done a terrible job of relaying the message that God is better than the stuff outside. So why would I come in here when I can do what I want to do and reap benefits? Listen, this is biblical. It's not even, this isn't the sermon, it's not in the text. Just stay with me. Exodus chapter 14. The Israelites are leaving, 13. They're leaving Egypt. They're walking out of Egypt. And God says, he says, there's a way that they could have gone that was shorter than the way they went. Go back and read it. I don't have time to go into it. There's a way that was shorter. But he knew that Israel would see war. And when they saw it, they're like, I'm going back. They had not yet founded a belief in him enough to sustain them in situations of distress. He understands that if you don't have faith in him, there's nothing keeping you with him. So since we're learning to stand up and stand out, I figured, why not look at a text that describes the faith required to stand up and stand out? Matthew 14. I want to go back a little bit, starting in verse 22. This is the tale. Everyone knows it. We're so familiar with it. Peter walking on the water. Kids can recite it. We sing about it in children's story for songs, and it's become a bedtime story. We're so familiar with it that sometimes we miss the important things. And we can recite it. Peter was walking on water, and he took his eyes off Jesus, and he sunk underneath the waves. Very good, children. Go back to your seats. It's so elementary to us, we miss it. The text tells us in verse 22 that Jesus and the disciples, they just finished feeding 5,000 people. They fed 5,000 people with the contents of your lunchbox, guys. 5,000 people were fed with enough food for Anna to eat for breakfast and dinner. And they watched this amazing thing. And immediately after, Jesus said, hey, get in the boat. We're going across to the other side. They get in the boat. They separate from Jesus. Jesus goes up on the mountain to pray. This is also not in the sermon, but I want you to get this. The text says Jesus gets up on the mountain to pray, and he was there alone. In your understanding of how God works with miracles, I need you to understand this. All big, earth-shattering, life-changing miracles must first begin with prayer. All big, life-altering miracles are going to start out with prayer. Jesus gets up on the mountain and he prays. And from there, the text continues and says that the boat now, which was separate from Jesus, was already a long way off from the shore, and it was being battered by the waves. It was being tormented, the text says. Inhibited. They weren't making any progress. They weren't going forward. They weren't going back. They were stuck, tormented by the waves. Why? Why? Because the wind was strong. They were tormented by the waves. Text says because the wind was contrary. The wind was contrary. Hold on to that. And so Jesus now, text says, in the fourth watch of the night, between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., Jesus now comes to them walking on the sea. I need you to get this before we get to this text. Jesus sets them out. They're being inhibited by the waves. And the waves are being busted about, moved about, and it's tossing the boat. And the thing that's moving the waves is wind. Jesus now comes walking to them in the midst of this contrary wind and this tormenting wave. He walks over to them. Now watch this. The disciples had just watched Jesus divide Anna's lunch and feed 5,000 men, the text says. It's not accounting for the women and children. They watched him divide this thing, and it kept dividing, and it kept dividing, and it kept dividing, and they had 12 baskets full left over. That's a miracle. They watched this miracle. Now watch this. Yet when Jesus comes walking to them on the water, they're afraid. In fact, they're so afraid that these people who don't believe in ghosts, they don't believe in ghosts. They're so afraid that they look at him coming and say, this can't be anything but a ghost. They cry out, it's a ghost. And they were terrified. They cried out in fear. I need to get this. I need to get this. When Jesus is ready to work, when he's ready to work, the things that he'll do before you will be so big that anything he's done beforehand won't even lend itself to your understanding that this is God. Listen. When Jesus is about to move, it's going to be so big, that you won't even be prepared to receive it. But here's the other thing. He came to them walking on the waves. I need you to get this. They cried out, it's a ghost. Because they were afraid. And because they weren't expecting Jesus to be there. He said, get in the boat. I'll meet you on the other side. This is an instance where God shows up in a time and in a manner that was unexpected by the people who were waiting for him. I need you to get this. So not only is God going to show up in a way that's huge, he's going to show up in a manner that you don't expect him to. He steps out, he walks on these waves, he approaches them, they cry out, it's a ghost, and he said, listen, take courage. It is I, do not be afraid. Don't be, I know I've come to you in this manner that you weren't expecting. I know I've come to you in this manner that was huge. Don't be afraid. So now Peter, we know the story. Peter says, God, if it's you, let me come. Peter gets out the boat and he sinks. He walks on the water and he sinks. But he walks on the water. Then he sinks. Can we unpack this thing? I just want to teach for a second. Can we just spend a little time and slow this down for a second? Peter says to him, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. What does he say? What does he say? If it's you, command me to come on the water. And I want to argue that we may be doing Peter an injustice as we talk about this. You hear it preached, and oh, Peter, you know Peter, good old Peter. Peter can't close his mouth. Peter doesn't know when to sit down. Peter always has to show off. And I feel like we're being a little hard on Peter. If you look at the construction of this sentence, Peter says, God, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you. Almost as if he's saying, God, we're in a boat in the middle of water, in the middle of a lake that's tossing this boat around. You can't pay me enough to get out of this boat. But if it's you, command me to come to you on the water. Can we do this? Peter's understood something that's very necessary for us to get this whole stand up thing. Peter has recognized that God's presence in the middle of what seems to be a disastrous situation mandates that your presence there is fine. He says, God, there's no way I want to get out of this boat. But if it's you, I'm almost compelled to come to you on the water. God, if it's you, command me to come to you. Text says, Peter gets up, he puts one foot on the water. Surprisingly solid. Takes his next foot and steps out on the boat. The fear on his face almost melts away and is replaced by excitement. He's standing on water. He takes one step toward Jesus and he doesn't sink in. He takes another step toward Jesus and he's continuing to stand on the water. He can let go of the boat that he's been holding on to, and he's taking steps toward Jesus on the water. Text says that he's distracted. We know this. Takes his eyes off Jesus and he begins to sink. Jesus immediately sticks his hand in the water, pulls him up, and says to him, "Why did you doubt? Oh, you of little faith." Now this bothers me. And it might not bother you, but it bothers me. It bothered me so much that I was like, no, this can't be right. I went back and looked at the Greek and made sure that the construction was right. Jesus is looking at Peter and saying, the reason you sunk is because your faith was small. Now this bothers me. And if it doesn't bother you yet, it will in a second. I'll tell you why it bothers me. Jesus has called Peter to step out on water. Anybody in here walk on water today? And you guys stand on water in the bathtub? No? You did? I need to see this. I need to see this. Jesus has called Peter to step out on water. And Peter has walked toward him on the water. That's incredible. Yet Jesus looks at him and says, small faith.